What's up, everybody on YouTube? AJ Rest back to discuss another video. And today we're going to be talking about the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 13. Week 13, only 5 weeks left in the NFL regular season. It's zooming by, guys, for real. But there's a lot of games to talk about. I hope y'all had a blessed Thanksgiving with your loved ones, your family, friends. And we had some football on those days too, and also on Black Friday. Thanksgiving, of course, consisted of the game between the Lions and the Bears, where essentially Matt Eberflus lost his job with the horrible time management. Oh my gosh, that was awful. But we're gonna talk about that in the game. They snapped a 7-game losing streak on Thanksgiving. That's crazy that they had that, but Lions still one of the best teams in the league, and they have a great game in Week 14 on Thursday Night Football between the Packers and the Lions, so that'll be really good. Also, the Dallas Cowboys got a win over the New York Giants. Nothing really too much to be said there. The Giants are one of the worst teams in the league. The Cowboys aren't that great either, but they got a win. Also on Thanksgiving, the Miami Dolphins lost another cold game on the road. I believe now the record is 0-12 in games below 40-degree weather. That's insane. But Packers, they look really good. Like I said, they play against the Lions in Week 14. That'll be a great matchup in Detroit. But yeah, there were a lot of good games. Also had Cincinnati Bengals playing against the Steelers, a divisional game there, the Chiefs and Raiders game that took place on Black Friday, which was very controversial in the ending, which we'll get into, of course. The Arizona Cardinals played the Vikings. Of course, the game between the Eagles and the Ravens. Sunday Night Football, of course, between the 49ers and the Bills. And then the final game that took place for Week 13, the matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Cleveland Browns. So there's a good amount of games to talk about. With that being said, though, guys, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know we post about here videos about the NBA, NFL, Marvel, DC, pop culture, cooking videos, shorts, reels, all content, things of that nature. With that being said, let's talk about NFL Week 13.
Barney monkey.
So this game at first, and especially in the first half, it wasn't close at all. The Lions were driving down the field with ease on the Chicago Bears, and it was 16-0 at halftime. But the Bears, they were able to recuperate and get things going in the second half. And first, before we talk about the coaching malpractice at the end in terms of time management with the Chicago Bears and Matt Eberflus, which ultimately led to his demise and being his last game as a Bears head coach, let's talk about how Caleb Williams has been playing the past few games. And in this game, Caleb completed 20 out of his 39 passing attempts, threw for 256 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. I will only say the real fatal flaw that he had in this game was taking that sack before that final play with the Bears, but I'm not going to blame it just on him, because talking about Matt Eberflus, you have to call a timeout there. Every single coach in America, regardless of level who coaches football, knows to take a timeout after taking a sack, especially when you have one. Or are you keeping it for? It makes no sense. And now the Bears will have Thomas Brown, who has been calling the plays since their OC was fired. He'll now serve as an interim head coach, but I think that'll be a good sign in terms of the offense, because they've been playing good under Thomas Brown. They've just been dealt with a lot of tough teams to play against, and they have to play against every single team in their division once again, so it's not looking good for the Bears, honestly. I continue to bring this fact up. In the first 6 weeks, they were 4-2, and now they're 4-8. They have lost 6 games straight. It's a bad beat for them. So at least their offense has been looking good. DJ Moore had 97 receiving yards and a touchdown. Keenan Allen had 73 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, but it's not leading to wins right now, and hopefully the coaching change will be able to revitalize something in them. But moving on to the Detroit Lions, I brought up the stat in the intro that they had lost their previous 7 straight games on Thanksgiving. They were finally able to snap that. They almost lost this one, though, like I said, because if Matt Eberflus actually used common sense, they could have potentially either won the game or put it in overtime, and that would have been an interesting dynamic there. But the Lions won. Overall physical game from them. David Montgomery had 88 rushing yards. Jahmyr Gibbs had 87 rushing yards. Jared Goff completed 21 out of 34 passing attempts, throwing 221 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. So overall, just a good game from them offensively and defensively, and they're able to pull this one out. For the Bears, there's going to be a lot of conversation on who the next head coach will be. We'll see how Thomas Brown finishes. I would say give him a chance, potentially how he has been able to revitalize the offense. But Ben Johnson of the Lions, I'm not going to lie, the offense coordinator, he would be a good fit to get things going with Caleb, but only time will tell.
That's what Micah Parsons does. Let me just turn you around. Are you kidding me? How many times do you see a tackle running back at your quarterback? But that's what Micah Parsons does to you.
The second game of the Thanksgiving slate was between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants, and the Dallas Cowboys won 27-20. Moving on to a 5-7 record, and now the Giants are 2-10. A matchup between two bad teams, and as a Cowboys fan, I want to bring this stat up, I'm not going to lie, because people were talking about this being the nap game. Well, almost 40 million people watched this game. 38.5 million to be exact. So regardless of what y'all say, haters, y'all are still always going to pay attention to the Cowboys. But anyways, let me stop acting like a fan now, because I can go on a tangent about that. I'm not a delusional Cowboys fan. There's good ones too, guys. But anyways, the Cowboys won this game. Nothing too much to be said, to be honest. If they would have lost to the Giants, that would have been rock bottom for sure, but they won the game convincingly. Some things to take away from me, in my opinion, because there's not really too much to be said about these teams because they haven't been good this year. DeMarvion Overshown, I told a lot of people about him before the season. No one was paying attention, but now people are starting to wake up. He missed the season last year, and he's going to be one of the best linebackers in the league for years to come. Had a pick 6 in this game. Just had a great game overall. His presence for the Dallas Cowboys has been huge. I know it's been a down year for them, but he's been one of the bright spots, and him and Micah Parsons, they're going to be a lethal combo for years to come. come. Offensively, the Cowboys had good balance. I'll say Rico Dowdle, he had his best game of his career so far. Had 22 carries for 112 rushing yards and a touchdown. And we recognize the Giants for having a pretty good defensive front, at least in the defensive line department. So that's impressive from Rico, and really impressive for the Dallas Cowboys offensive line too. Young offensive line to get things going. Cooper Rush threw for 195 passing yards and a touchdown. Not too much to be said there, and not too much to be said from the Giants either. If I had to give my take on the New York Giants situation right now, I would say that Brian Daboll is a good coach. He won Coach of the Year in 2022 for a reason. Even won a playoff game too as well. I wouldn't say that he's a problem. It's obviously the roster management and how things are constructed. So first thing starts with getting them a good quarterback, drafting one, whether it's Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, or they try to look for a veteran or someone in free agency or someone to trade for. I don't know how that'll work, but you have a weapon like Malik Neighbors who's going to need the football and someone adequate to get it to him. So yeah, but it's a good win for Dallas. They play against the Bengals in week 14 on Monday Night Football, so that'll be an interesting matchup certainly. But yeah, they got the dub on Thanksgiving. This game, I think the final score is more deceiving than what it really was. Yes, the Green Bay Packers won 30-17, but at halftime it was 24-3. So that says a lot. Like I said, the Miami Dolphins, they just don't play good in cold weather, and it's a fact. It's not an opinion. It's not a narrative. It's a proven fact. And we can talk about it overall. Like I said, when I say Tua's stats, they're gonna look really good, but the game was never really close, and Green Bay really dictated their terms. Tua Tagovailoa, yes, this is gonna sound great, completed 37 out of his 46 passing attempts for 365 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, 365 passing yards, 46 attempts. That means that the Green Bay Packers defense, they were stopping the freak out of the run. Want to guess how many rushing yards the Miami Dolphins had? 39 rushing yards. That tells you all you need to know. That's why Tua Tagovailoa almost had 50 attempts throwing the ball. That tells you a lot. I will say the past 3 to 4 weeks though, Jonnu Smith, he's been the best passing weapon for the Miami Dolphins. He had 10 receptions for 113 receiving yards, no touchdowns. Tyreek Hill had 83 receiving yards and a touchdown, and Devon Achane, he had 56 receiving yards and a touchdown, but they just can't play good in cold weather. I don't know what it is, but moving on to the Green Bay Packers, they aren't leading their division, but you still have to look at them as a legit threat to represent the NFC potentially in the Super Bowl, because I know Jordan Love sometimes makes mistakes. He didn't throw a pick in this game, so that was good, but overall, their team has great balance offensively and defensively. Talking about Jordan Love, he completed 21 out of his 28 passing attempts, threw for 274 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs had a rushing touchdown. And you talk about the weapons that they have receiving wise, there's good balance. Tucker Kraft had 78 receiving yards. Josh Jacobs also had 74 receiving yards and himself too, so that was really good. Christian Watson had 67 receiving yards on 2 receptions, and Jaden Reed didn't have the most receiving yards with only 24, but also had 2 receiving touchdowns. So there's a lot of balance there. Their team is good and they're on the rise for sure, so you have to look at them as legit candidates in the NFC and the NFL overall, and it's a good win for Green Bay. That matchup between the Lions and Green Bay, it's going to be really good in week 14. For this game, I don't really want to focus on that last play and the botch snap and all things of that nature and the flag that ultimately led to the Raiders not having a chance to win the game on a field goal. I want to talk about the Chiefs in terms of how they're winning all of these one-score games, but there's still a lot of glaring problems with them. They've won 14 straight one-possession games, which is a good stat, I guess. That means you can close out games when it comes down to the wire. But for the Chiefs, I'm looking at that offensive line. Patrick Mahomes is constantly getting pressured, getting sacked, things of that nature, and it kind of looks similar to how things looked in the 2020 season when we saw things go all right in the Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying that it's not a good sign for sure. And I do not think that they're the best team in the AFC right now. I think the Bills are, and that's why they lost that matchup. But beyond that though, I really don't have too much to take away. I would say Patrick Mahomes, he didn't have any interceptions in this game, completed 26 out of his 46 passing attempts. He threw the ball a lot too, like Tua did, and had 306 passing yards. But they won the game. That's what mattered most. The defense, they made good plays when they were supposed to. But the Raiders, they came back in good fashion. They almost won the game. Aiden O'Connell, besides that last botch snap, he had a really good game and had his way against the Chiefs. Completed 23 out of his 35 passing attempts, threw for 340 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. The Chiefs defense, they did play good. They allowed less than 20 points. So I will say that, but O'Connell did play good against them. So you have to give your props to them. He's been solid at times for them when he has played. A lot of Minshew action this year and a little Desmond Ridder too when Aiden O'Connell has been hurt or injured reserve. But O'Connell, he's definitely a really good backup and he's a competent starting quarterback, I would say. So the Raiders, they always play the Chiefs tough. That's one thing to take away for sure. But they're going to need to draft Shedeur and add a lot of roster talent to help things going. But I will say one more thing before moving on to the next game. Brock Bowers has been the best tight end in the league this year, and I don't even think that's an argument. Had 10 receptions for 140 receiving yards and a touchdown. My goodness, Brock has been hooping. He is going to be a great weapon to the quarterback of the future. Hopefully Shedeur if you're a Raiders fan or whatever quarterback y'all get, but Brock has been the one great thing about the Raiders this season for sure, but the Chiefs won the game. So this game obviously included the Azeez Al-Shaair hit on Trevor Lawrence, and I'm going to say this, I don't think that his intent was to hurt Trevor. He even said in a post that he put out apologizing to Trevor and everyone that he talked to Trevor before the game and was wishing him well and was glad that he was back. So I don't think it was that. I think it was making a football play, and unfortunately his momentum led him to tackling Trevor, not realizing that he was sliding. So it sucks, and I hope that Trevor's going to be okay, but if anything, that's a referendum on the season of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It sucks, and mean, Trevor was battling out there to be with his team, and really the Jaguars defense for the most part played well. And even when Trevor Lawrence got out of the game, Mac Jones played pretty competent. And as you know by the final score, the Texans only won 23-20. So the Jaguars did their best to try to come back, but the Texans are obviously the better team, and they swept them for the season series. The Texans will have a bye week in week 14, so they now have an 8-5 record, and the Jaguars are now 2-10. I guess the question is if they're going to just continue to retain Doug Peterson and reevaluate everything in the offseason for the head coach. I don't know. We'll see about that. But the Texans, I will say this, man. I think every win that they've had this year, besides the Patriots win and maybe the Bills win too, but besides those potentially, they really haven't been that impressive to me. A lot of people had AFC Championship title hopes for them, or even going to the Super Bowl, but they're still not there yet. And a lot of people have to understand that last year they didn't have expectations. Now this year with expectations, adding Diggs, adding all the defensive weapons that they have, having Tank Dell, having Nico Collins, CJ Stroud into his second season. There's a lot there, and it's a year of tape as well too on CJ. So a lot of teams are adjusting to that. Also though, a main problem and component is their offensive line and all of the penalties. That's just a huge conversation here in the Houston area, which I'm from. So that's that with the Houston Texans, but they got the win. So that's what matters most. And we'll see what this stretch in December has for them, because in a 10-day or 11-day period, I believe they play against the Dolphins, the Ravens, and the Chiefs. So we're going to learn a lot about the Houston Texans by the end of this month, but they got this win. Man, shout out to Anthony Richardson, man. Not the best game from him, but he was able to make a play when it mattered most to get a 2-point conversion and end up leading the Colts to a 25-24 win over the New England Patriots. The Colts are now 6-7. They're still trying to fight their hopes into potentially being a wild card in the AFC, because the Texans, like I just talked about them, they're most likely going to win the AFC South, but we don't know how really true contenders they are. But for the Colts, it's a win you had to have. And Anthony Richardson, he didn't have the best stat. Completed 12 out of his 24 passing attempts, threw for 109 passing yards, had 2 passing touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions. But he also had a rushing touchdown, 148 rushing yards too. So you take the good with the bad, and he was able to lead the Colts to a win even despite the mistakes. And it was a good young quarterback matchup, I would say, as well too, because you have Drake May on the other side, who was pretty efficient, completed 24 out of his 30 passing attempts, threw for 238 passing yards, a touchdown, and interception. This is a really good game, I would say. Not necessarily expecting it to be that way, but I guess so, because the Patriots, they are competitive. They're 3-10, so don't get me wrong, they're not a good team, but they still have that Patriot identity of sorts with Gerard Mayo being a first-year head coach. He still has the defense playing well at times, but obviously they're bereft of talent on the offensive end, so they're going to need a lot of reinforcements to help Drake May going into the future. But you have your quarterback there, and for the Colts, I believe they have their quarterback in the future as well. They're in Indianapolis, so it's a good win for them. Now, this game presents a really intriguing conversation. Are the Atlanta Falcons frauds? Yes, they sit number 1 NFC South, but they have a 6-6 record now, and they've lost their previous 3 games, I believe. They lost to the Broncos, they lost to the Saints, and now they lost to the Chargers. And after a 4 interception performance from Kirk Cousins, there's going to be a lot of questions there. 4 picks, no touchdowns. The biggest bright spot for the Falcons in this game was Bijan Robinson, who had 26 carries for 102 rushing yards and a touchdown, and Ray McLeod, who had 4 receptions for 95 receiving yards. But man, 4 picks, when you lose a turnover margin like that, you're really not going to have a chance to win at all. I know the Detroit Lions won with Jared Goff throwing 5 interceptions against the Texans earlier this season, but that's an anomaly. For the Falcons, there's a lot of questions there, man. I know some people will probably talk about Michael Penix potentially starting at some point. I don't think that's going to happen this year. You're paying Kirk way too much money, and plus Kirk, he's had his moments. He's dominated against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but besides that, it's been up and down play in my opinion. But let's shed light on the winning team in this game, the Los Angeles Chargers. Man, Harbaugh has really instilled his culture in this team, and like I continue to say from previous weeks, this team is going to make the playoffs, and they're going to be a threat to one of these teams that they play in the first round, whether it's the Texans potentially as a 4th seed, or the Steelers, or whoever the 2nd seed will be, either the Bills or the Chiefs. I think the Bills are going to eventually end up sneaking up on the 1st seed to pass the Chiefs, but we'll see about that. That's a conversation for later. But the Chargers, they're a real threat, man, and they have good balance offensively and defensively. Like I said, defensively, forced Kirk to throw 4 picks. Justin Herbert didn't have to throw the ball too much, completed 16 out of his 23 passing attempts, threw for 147 passing yards. And they didn't have the most rushing yards in this game, only 56 total. Not good at all. But Lad McConkey, he's been a real catalyst and one of the best rookie receivers and receivers period this year. Had 9 receptions for 117 receiving yards. This team is just really good, man. And I like seeing Justin Herbert finally have some competency around him to finally put him in positions to succeed. So the Chargers, they're looking really good right now. The same old Jets. And I will say the Jets, they're about to go up 28-7 in this game against the Seahawks until Aaron Rodgers threw a 99-yard pick 6 to Leonard Williams. And that really just changed the whole momentum of the game. And the Seahawks ended up winning 26-21. The Seahawks are still first place in the NFC West with a 7-5 record now, and the Jets are 3-9. Just a terrible season for them, man. And no one expected them to be this bad. People expected them to be playoff contenders potentially, but it's just been a huge blow up for them, and they're gonna have to change a lot in the 2025 season. And that potentially starts with Aaron Rodgers being off the team, not being the quarterback for them. And that's a crazy conversation to be had, because last year in spring of 2023, the whole conversation was wow, that Aaron Rodgers is gonna be on the Jets. They finally have a quarterback, and they're gonna have a chance to be Super Bowl contenders. And that has changed tremendously less than 2 years, only a year and a half later. So that sucks for them. But for the Seahawks, people have to start waking up, man. They had their adversity during the season after starting off 3-0, lost some games, but they've been able to get more healthy healthy, get players back. And Geno Smith has been playing good football, completed 20 out of his 31 passing attempts, threw for 206 passing yards and a touchdown. Not the greatest day out of the running game, but Zach Charbonnet had a good rushing touchdown to help the Seahawks get in position to win. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I continue to say it. He's been one of the best young receivers in the league this year, had 4 receptions for 74 receiving yards. DK Metcalf also had 4 receptions for 66 receiving yards. But this defense under head coach Mike Macdonald has been able to identify into that Seattle culture, and they're in great position to win the NFC West. They play against the Cardinals in week 14 again after playing against them the other week. So if they win that, you can probably most likely say that they're going to win a division. So we'll see what happens, but the Seahawks, they're looking good right now. And for the Jets, it is very gloom. After losing to the Dallas Cowboys in week 12, the Washington Commanders absolutely fried, cooked, dominated the Tennessee Titans, winning 42-19. They now have an 8-5 record, and they've dealt with a lot of adversity this year. They started off really hot. Jaden Daniels, Offensive Rookie of the Year favorite. Now I think that's kind of shifted towards Bo Nix, but we'll see how the rest of the season finishes. But they got a huge win, and they really needed this win. Jaden Daniels went off in this game, completed 25 out of his 30 passing attempts, threw for 206 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception. Daniels also had a rushing touchdown too on 34 rushing yards. Then Brian Robinson Jr. had 16 carries for 103 rushing yards and a touchdown. Chris Rodriguez Jr. had 13 carries for 94 rushing yards and a touchdown. Terry McLaurin also had 8 receptions for 73 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. This team just went off, man, and they really needed this win. Like I said, after losing to the Cowboys, an underwhelming loss, they probably took that game for granted, and they were able to pick up a huge win in this game against Tennessee. I will say though about that Cowboys game, divisional games records, they're always out the mirror, because we saw with the Titans, they beat the Texans in week 12. And in this game, I will say Will Levis, he did throw for 212 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, but also he only completed 18 of his 37 passing attempts, so really inefficient there. Completion percentage under 50%, so that's not good at all. And the team overall only had 38 rushing yards. We see that out of the Titans a lot. They have some solid games, but a lot of games where they thud in the running game, and that's why they have a 3-9 record right now. So yeah, I will say Nick Westbrook, Akine, he had 3 receptions for 61 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. He's been one of their bright spots this year, but there hasn't been a lot of them, and it's a good win for the Washington Commanders.
Unlimited. Check him out too. He look good. Boy, all black, looking like Bruce Wayne. Unlimited.
Mr. Unlimited. The Pittsburgh Steelers got a really good win over the Cincinnati Bengals, one of their divisional rivals, winning 44-38. Moving on to a 9-3 record and still atop of the AFC North and having a 2-game lead over the Baltimore Ravens now. They also have to play against the Ravens again later this season, but man, this Steelers team, I think you can probably classify them as a fringe Super Bowl contender. I still have my question marks about them. I still think that the Bills would beat them, the Chiefs would beat them in the playoffs, but they're definitely up there, and you have to make the argument that they're the 3rd best team in the AFC right now. How they've been able to play offensively and defensively, and especially their offense, since Russell Wilson has entered into the fold as a starter, and he dominated this Bengals defense that has been one of the worst in the league. And ultimately, I think it's about personnel with them, because we've seen the Bengals defense be dominant in previous years when they made the Super Bowl, when they made the AFC Championship game, but in that secondary, they just get lit up all the time, and there was no doubt about that happening on Sunday against the Steelers. Russell Wilson, he completed 29 out of his 38 passing attempts, threw for 414 passing yards, threw 3 touchdowns and only 1 interception. The running game was prominent too. Najee Harris had 16 carries for 75 rushing yards and a touchdown. George Pickens had 3 receptions for 74 receiving yards and a touchdown too. And Freiermuth had 68 receiving yards on 6 receptions and 1 touchdown. So they just dominated them and sliced the defense up every which way. And that's been a conversation for the Bengals this whole season. The offense with Joe Burrow has absolutely dominated the entire year. But the defense doesn't help them at all. Besides the pick 6 that they did have, I will give them credit on that, but they still got sliced up regardless of that. So yeah, Joe Burrow, he completed 20 out of his 38 passing attempts, threw for 309 passing yards, 3 touchdowns and interception. I believe his touchdown to interception ratio is 21-3 this season so far, something like that. So we obviously know the offense isn't a problem. Jamar Chase, 86 receiving yards and a touchdown. T. Higgins, 69 receiving yards and a touchdown. And Yoshi Voss also had a touchdown too. So it's not the offense that has been the question mark. It's been the defense for them. And it really sucks because most likely the Bengals are going to miss the playoffs. They have a 4-8 record right now. They played the Dallas Cowboys in week 14, so they could get a win there. They could lose though, and that would be a referendum on the season. And I wonder if Zach Taylor is going to be on a hot seat potentially, because they have to stop starting off slow. You can't have that happen in 2025. I think they should give it one more chance with Zach Taylor, because he's the same coach that entered into the league with Joe Burrow. But man, they need to start off better next year, because this season is looking very glim for them, and they're gonna miss the playoffs. But the Steelers got the dub, and they're looking really hot right now. Besides that loss to the Browns, of course, the other week. The Cardinals were leading for a good amount in this game, but the Vikings were able to come back and beat the Arizona Cardinals, winning 23-22. Two really good teams in the NFC, and now the Vikings have a 10-2 record, and the Cardinals are dead even at 500 with a 6-6 record. And I talked about the Seahawks earlier in the NFC West, and same with the Cardinals in the same division. That Week 14 matchup next week is going to be very crucial to see who wins the division. Are the Cardinals going to give themselves a chance to potentially win the division, splitting the season series with them, or are they going to lose and be swept by the Seahawks? Only time will tell. That'll be a battle battle the birds, but even if they do lose that game, the Cardinals will have a chance to make the playoffs as a wild card. And for the Vikings, it's looking like the same thing. They're going to make the playoffs as a wild card too, being in the same division as the Detroit Lions and even the Packers, but the Vikings have a better record than the Packers, so obviously they're second right now. So if the Lions lose to the Packers, that'll be solid for the Vikings, but the Vikings will have to beat them again in the second matchup. So yeah, but getting into things furtherly, Sam Darnold, he had a pretty good game, completed 21 out of his 31 passing attempts, threw for 235 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, but the running game for the Vikings was really non-existent, and the Cardinals defense has been one of the most underrated in the league under head coach Jonathan Gannon, who's a great defensive head coach. We're able to stop the run, but Justin Jefferson, he got off against them, had 7 receptions for 99 receiving yards, and Jordan Addison also had 54 receiving yards, and Johnny Munt had a receiving touchdown too. And for the Cardinals, their offense, it was stagnant at times. Kyler Murray threw the ball a lot, completed 31 out of his 45 passing attempts, threw for 260 passing yards, a touchdown, but those 2 interceptions really hurt them down the stretch of the game. Trey McBride, though, had a really good game, had 12 receptions for 96 receiving yards, and Marvin Harrison Jr. had 5 receptions for 60 receiving yards and a touchdown. So both of these teams are solid teams in the NFC. The Vikings, of course, better, and the better team got the win in this matchup, but there's still hope for the Cardinals to potentially make the playoffs. Even if they don't win the division, they could slide in as a wild card. So they'll have to finish off strong, but it's definitely a possibility. But the Vikings got a good win. An unexpected close matchup in my opinion, but the Saints have been playing very physical and good football as of late, but the Los Angeles Rams beat the Saints, winning 21-14, and the Saints were up 6-0 at halftime. I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous as a person who has Matthew Stafford starting for him in fantasy. I was nervous, but they ended up getting things going, and now the Rams have a 6-6 record, also in the NFC West too, so they still have a chance theoretically to make the playoffs as a wild card. That division is actually really tough, so it's a lot to say about them with the Rams, the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. But getting into the stats furthermore, Matthew Stafford completed 14 out of his 24 passing attempts, threw for 183 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Kyren Williams, he's been huge for this team this year, had 15 carries for 104 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. Blake Corum even had 42 rushing yards, getting a little bit on there. Puka Nacua had a receiving touchdown. DeMarcus Robertson also had a receiving touchdown too. So like I said, that second half they were able to get things clicking, because the first half the Rams offense was pretty stagnant, and they were able to overcome that and get the win. Not really too much to be said about the Saints. I will say Alvin Kamara, he had a really good game, had 23 carries, 112 rushing yards. Derek Carr had a okay performance, I would say, completed 24 out of his 37 passing attempts, throwing for 184 passing yards and a touchdown, but nothing too significant, I would say, from them. And for the Saints, they now have a 4-8 record, nothing too special about it. They were able to grab a couple of wins after the Dennis Allen firing, but this team has a long way to go to be competitive next season, and that's really what they're building for, because this season is a wash. But the Rams, they still have some playoff hopes as a wild card. This game was surprisingly close, and the Panthers almost won it, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won this game, winning 26-23. They are now 500 at 6-6, and the Panthers are 3-9. But before diving into this game even more, we're going to give Bryce Young his flowers again, because he's been able to play really good football ever since he returned back into the starting lineup. Similarly to how Anthony Richardson went through that, Bryce Young has been able to revitalize himself. He threw the ball a lot in this game against the Buccaneers, not gonna lie, but he still played good. No turnovers, completed 26 out of his 46 passing attempts, threw for 298 passing yards and a touchdown. They really almost won a game in overtime if it wasn't for a Chuba Hubbard fumble, but I will say about Hubbard, he's been one of the most consistent players this year, and he earned that contract extension from them, so it sucks that happened, but still, this Panthers team has been looking more respectable as of lately, especially after that game with Kansas City. But there's no moral victories in football. But Adam Thielen, the veteran, he had a good game too, had 8 receptions for 99 receiving yards and a touchdown. Tommy Tremble also had 5 receptions for 77 receiving yards as well too, so good balance from this team, but it wasn't enough. The Buccaneers got a win. I'm sure it scared a lot of fans like my dad, who's a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. Baker was definitely a gunslinger in this game, for 235 passing yards, completed 21 out of his 33 passing attempts and had a touchdown but 2 interceptions. Sometimes he slings the ball a lot and throws it and forces it into tight windows, resulting into interceptions, but they were able to overcome that. Bucky Irvin has been a great rookie this year, had 25 carries for 152 rushing yards and a touchdown. Also Rashad White had 11 carries for 76 rushing yards, and Mike Evans, the future Hall of Famer from Galveston, Texas, close to Houston, not too far. Yes, sir, Galveston County, had 8 receptions for 118 receiving yards and a touchdown. So this team and the Buccaneers, they could win a division if the Falcons continue to fall off, because yes, the Falcons have the tiebreaker, but they haven't been playing good football at all. And like I said earlier, I think that the Falcons are kind of fraudulent, but the Buccaneers, they've won the division repeatedly the past few years, so there's a chance that they could win it again on accident potentially. But yeah, they won this game in overtime against the Carolina Panthers. A lot of people will say this was a potential Super Bowl preview, but I'm not sure about that, and I don't know if that's a controversial statement. I really don't think it is. This game between the Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens, where the Eagles won 24-19. But for me, the Ravens, they sometimes look like the best team in the league, and at other times they look very concerning, and this was a game where they looked very concerning. I think Lamar missed a lot of reads, and it's crazy because a few weeks ago he was by far easily the unanimous MVP favorite, but that game against the Steelers and now this game against the Eagles, not really impressive at all, and the stats won't necessarily tell you that. They also got up to a 9-0 lead too, but the conversation has been a lot about their defense too, but they have also at times become stagnant on offense, and this is no different. The stats are going to sound pretty, but there's more to the story. Lamar Jackson completed 23 out of his 36 passing attempts, threw for 237 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, but I'm telling you, there's just more to it. And really, this game was actually 24-12. Yeah, they had a late touchdown, but we knew the game was in all cases over. And the Eagles, they look like the best team in football, with them and the Lions and even the Bills as well too. I think those are the top 3 teams right now. But further conversation into the Eagles before I talk a little bit more about the Ravens. You want to talk about an MVP candidate? That's for sure Saquon Barkley. Had 23 carries for 107 rushing yards and a touchdown. Has really just changed this team overall. He really has. I think that he should easily win Offensive Player of the Year. And if he breaks that Eric Dickerson record, you have to give him the MVP. I know how Josh Allen has been playing, and we'll talk about that game against the 49ers in a second. But bro, he has single-handedly changed the identity of this team. And also, we have to give a credit defensively to the Eagles defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. He has really transformed this defense from the secondary with players like Quinyon Mitchell, who's a rookie, Cooper DeJean, who's a rookie as well, still having vets like Darius Slay, TJ Gardner-Johnson, but also on the defensive line, having Jordan Davis, having Jalen Carter, that two-headed monster right there. This team has really been able to lock in and play complementary football offensively and defensively, and that is why they could potentially make a Super Bowl run this year, and why them and the Lions sit in the class of their own in the NFC and potentially in the league right now. And Jalen Hurts, he played good football, didn't have to do too much. He had 29 rushing yards and of course a tush-push touchdown, threw for a passing touchdown, completing 11 out of his 19 passing attempts for 118 receiving yards as well too. So like I said, they look really good in this game. And also AJ Brown had 66 receiving yards on 5 receptions, and Dallas Goedert had a touchdown too. But for the Ravens, man, like I said, they got to get things going together. I will say the Eagles, they did a really good job of stopping the run too. Derrick Henry had 19 carries but only for 82 rushing yards, and their passing game wasn't all the way there. Mark Andrews had a receiving touchdown in the first half that was really good, and Isaiah Likely had that final one. But the Eagles, their defense is really impressive, and for the Ravens, they got to get stuff going before they even try to look at passing up the Steelers. They got to get things right with themselves, but they still have a chance. But the Eagles, man, they look really dangerous right now. The calendar literally just turned to December, and the Buffalo Bills have already clinched their division. Think about that. They had a dominant win in the snow over the San Francisco 49ers, winning 35-10. And before talking about the game, I want to say prayers up to Christian McCaffrey, because it looks like he's going to be out for the season now. After starting the season late from an Achilles injury that took a lot of concern, and now having a PCL injury in the snow against the Buffalo Bills, it really sucks, man. It has really been a nutshell of the 49ers season. They're now 5-7. Having a player like Brandon Ayuk out for the season, and just a lot of different players out of the fold. Same with Nick Bosa, who didn't play in this game either. It's just looking like one of those down years for the 49ers. And I will say that they'll probably have a good team next year too, but are we witnessing the demise and closing of their Super Bowl window? Only time will tell. But for the Buffalo Bills, their window was wide open, and a lot of people thought that they were going to regress this year. Well, that was cap. They also had an important player like Matt Milano returning this game defensively for them, and they just really got at Brock Purdy and really dominated the 49ers offense. And offensively, we already know Josh Allen. I think him and Saquon Barkley, it's a two-player conversation when it comes to the MVP. It's Saquon Barkley and it's Josh Allen. And even in his weather, Josh Allen went off, completed 13 out of his 17 passing attempts, threw for 148 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Also had good balance from James Cook, who had a 65-yard rushing touchdown, and also as a total had 14 carries for 107 rushing yards and a touchdown. Ray Davis also had 11 carries for 63 rushing yards and a touchdown too. Had to heavily focus on the running game in these weather conditions, and they use that as an advantage in Buffalo, so that's a good thing for them too. Also, that lateral from Amari Cooper to Josh Allen, that was a beautiful play, one of the best plays of this year, of this season so far. And this team is just well balanced. Dawson Knox also had 2 receptions for 56 receiving yards. Khalil Shakir had 30 receiving yards, and also Mac Hollins had a receiving touchdown. And Josh Allen, like I said, he had that receiving touchdown too technically. So this team, they're just looking really good. Shout out to Josh Allen too. Just got engaged to Haley Steinfeld. Hey, got engaged to Hawkeye. That's lit. Or should I say Spider-Gwen? Yes, sir. But anyways, let me chill. My Marvel nerd is showing out right now. But man, the Bills, they look really good. And I'm telling you, they are the biggest threat to the Chiefs right now. And honestly, if the Chiefs lose another game or two, the Bills are going to have the number 1 seed. So that's a crazy thing to say after all the things that people said about the Bills going into this year, how people said that Josh Allen was overrated. Well, he might mess around and win an MVP this year, and the Bills might have their best opportunities so far in the Josh Allen era to win the Super Bowl. What an amazing Monday Night Football game, a matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Cleveland Browns. A total of 73 points scored, and we definitely got the full Jameis Winston experience. Regardless of what happens, he's entertaining, and I believe he had the most passing yards in this game in Browns history, but also he accounted for 6 touchdowns, which is great, but unfortunately 2 of those touchdowns were pick sixes to the Denver Broncos. And in this game, he completed 34 out of his 58 passing attempts. They almost threw the ball 60 times. The running game really wasn't existent there, so I mean, I guess it makes sense. Threw for 497 passing yards, those 4 touchdowns, and also 3 interceptions. That last interception at the end of the game, it really hurt, but the second pick six really, in my opinion, is what altered the game and towards the Broncos' favor, leading them to winning the game. And even though the Browns were about to drive to score a touchdown before that last interception, still think that the Broncos were going to win. So the season has been tough for the Browns, and if you're a Browns fan, but I will say though, Jameis Winston, his wisdom, his pure joy for football, because at the end of the day, this is a kid's game and grown men are playing, and it's about fun. So he's able to bring that to the locker room, and I think he's one of the best backups in the league, and I think you want to have him on your team for sure as a leader. But the Browns, let's call it what it is, they are a bad football team, but at least we're going to be seeing more of them on Hard Knocks in terms of Jameis Winston. But flipping sides to the Broncos, though, this team is going to make the playoffs. They have an 8-5 record now. And Bo Nix, he didn't have a great game. Completed 18 out of his 35 passing attempts, threw for 294 passing yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. The defense, like I said, those pick sixes were really integral in terms of changing the tide to the Broncos' favor. And also the rapport that Bo Nix has with Marvin Mims Jr. and Cortland Sutton is really good. Marvin Mims had that long 93 receiving yard touchdown and had 3 receptions for 105 receiving yards and a touchdown. Then Cortland Sutton had 6 receptions for 102 receiving yards too. So this team just has a good identity offensively, and of course we know they have Pat Surtain, one of the best defensive players and defensive backs in the league. So they're looking really good. No one expected this out of this season, and I will say it's a great job that Sean Payton has done with this team. So it's a good win for the Denver Broncos. So guys, let me know your biggest takeaways from NFL Week 13. Every single week at the outro, I want to share my top 5 teams. So right now, I'll probably put the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 5, playing really good football and complimentary football offensively and defensively. Number 4, while the Chiefs have one loss, their point differential is a little concerning in my opinion, so that's why I have them at number 4. At number 3, have the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen having an MVP type campaign. They're looking really dominant. Number 2, with the Philadelphia Eagles, how great they look offensively and defensively. Saquon Barkley potentially having an MVP campaign as well too, especially if he breaks Eric Dickerson's record. And then at number 1, have to have the Detroit Lions. Believe they've won 10 straight, 9 straight, something like that. Just playing really good football. Like I said earlier, that matchup between the Green Bay Packers and the Lions, it's going to be really good on Thursday Night Football. So let me know your top 5 list as well. I appreciate you guys watching. Always make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss. Also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for cooking videos, shorts, reels, all types of content, things of that nature. Know that you are loved. God loves you. You are beautifully and wonderfully made. You have purpose. Continue to lift others up towards Christ. Know that you are loved and you matter. Stay tuned for more videos and y'all have a good one. And early happy holidays.